Only the BBC in England played it, and we knew when 940. Ringo Starr turned 85, but fans fretted about his party. The Beatles drummer cried at his yearly peace and love moment. Sickness forced him to cancel Philadelphia and New York gigs. Resting was advised by doctors, but something was awry. In his birthday address, he publicly lamented John and George for the first time. He spoke with a crack. "What's wrong with the last bug that's worrying everyone?" Richard Starkey was born at 9 Madryn Street, Liverpool, on July 7, 1940. That July, German bombs hit the city practically nightly. His parents attempted to stay calm, but the world was trembling. His baker father, Richard Starkey Sr., was already fading. His father departed when Richard was 3 and never returned. Mother Elsie suddenly raised him alone. She cleaned during the day and bartended at night to pay rent and food. They moved to a cheaper apartment in 1944 since they couldn't afford it. An even worse event happened. At 6, Richard's appendix burst. It started out as another procedure, but something went awry. He was in a coma for days after contracting peritonitis. Nobody knew if he would survive. He was hospitalized for about a year, away from his mother. He was 8 years old and couldn't read or count when he escaped in May 1948. He didn't gripe. He persisted. After having tutoring to catch up in school, catastrophe struck again at 13. Richard became ill in 1953 during a school TB outbreak. He spent 2 years at a special hospital. Quite lonely. No school, no friends. Only silence. But one day, a nurse gave him a cotton bobbin mallet and ordered him to pound it on a metal cabinet for fun. He was energized by the sound. He couldn't stop listening to Bedtime for Drums, a disc a health worker gave him. That was his first sense of ownership. He was raised in Liverpool's toughest neighborhood, Dingle. Gang battles and danger abounded. Richard joined one to survive. Most weeks he was beaten. Once, a competing group attacked him so viciously that it changed his self-image forever. He was already little and quiet, but that made him feel even more insecure. He escaped with music. It gave him motivation to keep going. When he was 16, he became a manufacturing apprentice machinist in 1956. He met Roy Trafford, a skiffle fan who loved jazz, folk, and blues. The band formed in the manufacturing basement with Eddie Miles, another laborer. Richard received a used drum equipment for Christmas 1957 from his stepfather. 2 months later, he joined Eddie Clayton's skiffle group. His first real gig was at the Cavern Club on July 31, 1957. He worked at the factory all day and played music at night. The only thing that made him happy. He was invited to join the Hurricanes in November 1959. A genuine drum kit was needed, and he had one. They became Rory Storm and the Hurricanes before he joined. He became Ringo Starr then. Starr made his several rings seem impressive. Starr sang Shirelles songs like Boys during his solo stint. Rory Storm and the Hurricanes outsold the Beatles in Liverpool by 1960. Hamburg followed. Their October 1960 performance in Germany's red light district was booked. City was wild. George Harrison termed it the world's naughtiest metropolis. According to Paul McCartney, every lady there was a stripper or a prostitute. Players played all night, used drugs, drank incessantly, and barely slept. It was chaos. Paul and drummer Pete Best were jailed on November 29, 1960, for burning a condom in their darkroom. They were deported December 1. Despite the craziness, Ringo lived. When Pete Best couldn't make it, Ringo recorded with John, Paul, and George for the first time. On October 15, 1960, they supported Lou Walters on Summertime. It was years before the Beatles were famous. They recorded Cry for a Shadow with Tony Sheridan in 1961 while Ringo and his band struggled. No stable income. Ringo considered relocating to America for greater possibilities. But something drew him to those 3 Liverpool youngsters. Pete Best missed many gigs in early 1962. On February 5, 1962, Ringo filled in again, and George Harrison thought, that's it. Ringo was still under contract with the Hurricanes, but they wanted him full-time. That one performance didn't matter to Ringo, but it started something big. On August 16, 1962, Pete Best was abruptly fired. Ringo joined the Beatles on August 18. Not a happy moment. Fans raged. At the Cavern Club on August 19, half the crowd chanted Pete forever, Ringo never. George Harrison arrived with a black eye after being headbutted in a hallway. The stage was pelted. Death threats to Ringo. He endured weeks of street harassment. He wondered if it was worth it. Recordings followed. He performed for George Martin at Abbey Road on September 4, 1962. Who wasn't impressed? Martin added drummer Andy White a week later on September 11 and had Ringo play tambourine. Ringo was shamed. He felt they were treating me like Pete. He believed he was done. The other Beatles pranked him during 1963 tours. To test his stress tolerance, they hid his drums, lied about showtimes, and fabricated bogus emergencies. The band had to use someone else's instruments during one Welsh gig since theirs had inexplicably gone. It was hard, but Ringo maintained cool. He gradually gained their trust. Being left-handed, he played drums oddly with a right-handed kit. Although his odd setup made his rhythm sound unique, he constantly worried it made him seem poor as a drummer. He practiced constantly. Worried about being replaced. He lost sleep over it, but the Beatles adopted it. Songs like Love Me Do and Please Please Me seemed unique. Ringo fell at a picture shoot on June 3, 1964, before their world tour. Doctors confirmed tonsillitis after his 102-degree fever. This band had to decide whether to cancel their biggest American performances or replace him. They hired Jimmy Nicole as a drummer. Ringo skipped 8 Danish, Dutch, and Australian shows. Infuriated, George Harrison threatened to leave the tour. Ringo refused surgery and flew to Australia while sick to rejoin the band in Melbourne on June 15. One disease nearly destroyed everything they built. The Beatles arrived at JFK on February 7, 1964, unaware of what was ahead. 4,000 supporters screamed before the doors opened. Ringo smiled as he left, unaware that he would attract pandemonium. His goofiness made him popular, but the love was hazardous. 4 months later, 500 schoolgirls in San Francisco went crazy to meet him during a short airport layover on June 13. 5 collapsed from hysterics. California's Beatles fan club was led by 18-year-old Helena Rand. She gave Ringo a surfing shirt before fainting in his arms. Police had to use human shields to prevent him from being crushed. 20 officers barely contained the crowd. Ringo smiled through it all. He even added, "I like it." That was merely the start of Beatlemania's damage. Ringo became famous in 1964's A Hard Day's Night due to his wit. He effortlessly stole scenes. But the attractiveness hid fatigue. Ringo fell at a picture shoot on June 3, a day before their world tour. His fever was high. Hurried to hospital with acute tonsillitis. The doctor advised rest, but the tour was urgent. To replace him, Jimmy Nicole was paid $2,500 per concert. Ringo feared he was exiled forever. He saw someone behind his drums from a hospital bed. His fear persisted when he returned a week later. Beatles flew to Bahamas in 1965 to shoot Help. They expected a fun experience, but it felt like a trap. Locals didn't want a British band making headlines in a sensitive political situation. John Lennon drank throughout. He stated local officials insulted them frequently, making the situation embarrassing. His temper nearly broke out and he yelled back. Bodyguards were needed to relocate the band because of strict security. Ringo, normally the peacemaker, felt the tension building by the hour. Not enjoyable anymore. A sense of survival. By 1966, things changed. On July 4 and 5, the Beatles performed in Manila. Next morning, headlines claimed they ignored First Lady Imelda Marcos. The lunch was never agreed upon. In a fear-based nation, that didn't matter. Their police protection ended. Airport escalators were off. They dragged their gear while government thugs in fake military costumes swung weapons in clubs. Epstein was punched. Road manager Mal Evans was kicked and bled on the pavement. Just to fly, they paid 74,450 pesos. They never returned. Ringo felt aloner than ever in 1967. He felt invisible when recording Sgt. Pepper's A Day in the Life drumming, which would later be renamed Legendary. He quipped that he learnt to play chess by hanging around while others tried LSD in new sounds. George felt the band had become unrecognizable. Paul played piano and Ringo kept time. His involvement was minimal, but the songs wouldn't have functioned without him. On August 22, 1968, something snapped. John Cleese, Raquel Welch, and Christopher Lee were cast, but the message was lost. Ringo claimed that taught him a hard lesson about careful role selection. After 12 years, he joined Caveman, a ridiculous comedy that changed his life forever in 1981. Ringo shattered his arm filming a stunt and had to stop working. Having more time on set with co-star Barbara Bach was a blessing. They got married soon after filming since they got closer every day. Barbara later revealed that the shoot's tension and Ringo's injuries deepened their relationship. Despite being comedic and weird, the movie generated one of the longest celebrity marriages. Ringo experimented with furniture design in the 1970s. He and designer Robin Cruikshank founded RR, which was Ringo or Robin. From the Apple Corps headquarters at 3 Savile Row, they won a $10 million contract to outfit Abu Dhabi and Oman palaces. Their high-end taste didn't appeal to purchasers, even if one table had a Rolls-Royce grill. Their furnishings gathered dust in Liberty and Harvey Nichols. The mid-1980s bankruptcy of the corporation, which Ringo owned 51% of, devastated him. He learned from his severe losses that creative vision wasn't enough if no one bought. Thomas the Tank Engine fans were saddened when Ringo was replaced in 1990. Since 1984, children have grown up with his calm, soothing voice as Mr. Conductor and narrator. But a contract conflict changed everything. After negotiations failed in 1989, producers replaced him with George Carlin. Instantaneous blowback. Fans wanted no one else. In reference to Ringo replacing the Beatles drummer, Carlin joked that he was now the anti-Pete Best. Carlin taped Ringo's episodes until season 4. But many people felt something beautiful was lost. In the meantime, Ringo's personal life was falling apart. His marriage to Maureen Cox had been strained for years when it burst in 1970. Ringo was intoxicated, unfaithful, and absent. The bombshell followed. Maureen found Ringo's bandmate in bed with her one night. "I'm in love with your wife," George told Ringo at dinner. Ringo didn't yell or fight. He simply said, "Better you than someone unknown." Maureen spotted Ringo with American model Nancy Lee Andrews in 1974, ending it. Their divorce was finalized July 17, 1975. Ringo gave Maureen $125,000 upfront. Their 3 children received $2,500 apiece and $23,000 annually. She had complete custody. Ringo visited. Darkness fell in the late 1970s. Ringo was addicted to cocaine. A 1978 overdose sent him to the hospital. He later said he drank 16 bottles of wine a day and seldom ate since cocaine ruined his appetite. Francesca, his stepdaughter, stated he and Barbara withdrew from the world and drank and used drugs every day. Ringo later stated that his life was a haze. He had images of himself on stage worldwide but swore he had no memory. The breaking moment was 1988. On Friday afternoon, Ringo woke up bewildered and shocked. His staff said he had trashed the house so terribly it looked burglarized. Worse, Barbara was so wounded and abused they thought she was dead. 2 weeks after that horrific event, they entered a Tucson, Arizona, recovery center. Ringo testified in 1989 that he knew he had a drinking problem since 1982 but didn't know how to stop. He reported drinking 16 bottles of wine daily. The brutality and agony of that day were his rock bottom for rehabilitation. Ringo made another court appearance in 1980. After his divorce, Maureen wanted new custody and financial support. Her lawyers portrayed him as a dangerous addict who couldn't be trusted with his kids. "He was a fantastic handicap," she said, comparing him to the cartoon drunk who cheated on his wife. Despite Ringo giving her full custody in 1975, the legal battle became nasty. Maureen lost after paying attorneys almost $200,000. Ringo voluntarily upped her annual payments, the judge observed, and was generous. But his troubled life was revealed to the public. Ringo, 84, was touring when all stopped in 2024. He was unwell before a Philadelphia event and physicians ordered him to rest. He cancelled that night's and Radio City Music Hall's concerts. The fans were shocked. He played at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, where his all-star band had started 35 years ago, and had finished 10 of 12 gigs on his fall tour. Despite his claims that he was fit and worked out daily, the cancellation showed how precarious life had become. His 85th birthday was July 7, 2025. The party should have been simple, but supporters worldwide became emotional. Beverly Hills designated Ringo Starr Day. What many recalled most was his sad message. The noon peace and love moment was Ringo's first public mourning of John Lennon and George Harrison. The annual Chicago tradition began with 100 fans in 2008. It now spans 30 nations. NASA helped him send his message to the moon and back this year. It went beyond a birthday. It was memorialized. Just when folks believed he'd slow down, Ringo continued. The 2025 announcement came after he completed 2 country albums. One with T-Bone Burnett was scheduled for 2026 release. Ringo smiled when reporters asked whether he was retiring, saying his kids were tired of hearing that line for 10 years. Carl Perkins, a Beatles' early influence, would be covered on the new album. Ringo claimed he was ready to leave whenever a gig was provided. Despite its love and success, 2025 has dark sides. His art displays, including a recent Las Vegas one, raised millions for the Lotus Foundation. He made extreme spin art using a modified Rolls-Royce engine. And every penny supported cancer research and addiction support. The Pandora Papers whispered. They uncovered Ringo's 5 Panama and Bahama offshore trusts. Ringo left Abbey Road. Paul criticized Ringo's drumming on Back in the USSR, and Ringo had enough. He told others he felt unwanted and inadequate. John's reply stunned him. I thought you 3. Ringo sailed to Sardinia alone and wrote Octopus's Garden. The band pleaded for his return. Arriving on September 4, his drum kit was decorated in flowers spelling out "Welcome back, Ringo." Then 1969. Yoko Ono broke the band's silence. No wives in studio. John gave her a hospital bed at Abbey Road to recover from their automobile wreck while watching them record. Ringo, caught in the middle, struggled to maintain peace. But he watched the studio become a war zone. Yoko joked that heroin exorcised them. No one laughed. Ringo couldn't believe his ears. McCartney says he perceived a 5th insect in the room, not just Yoko. It was the drug. On September 8, 1969, Ringo was hospitalized with acute stomach pain. His childhood illness returned at the worst time, during Abbey Road recordings. Paul, John, and George secretly wondered if they could finish the album without him. Fear wasn't limited to music. They worried about losing their drummer and pal. That week altered their relationship. They thought this might be their last record. It would be incomplete without Ringo. Later that month, on August 22, Ringo saw something worse. Yoko and John were tied up in a chair in Abbey Road, trying to quit heroin cold turkey. John begged for relief for 36 hours, sweating and screaming. Ringo tried to help, but John reacted. He claimed the band drove him there. John penned cold turkey that night while his body twisted in misery. Some days later, he used again. Ringo saw his pal leave helpless. Ringo delivered a note to Paul's house in 1970, before things fell apart. To accommodate Let It Be, Paul had to delay his solo album. Paul erupted. He yelled, "I'll finish you now," and pointed at Ringo. Ringo silently put on his coat and departed. Only once did their friendship turn violent. The song Early 1970 by Ringo softly criticized Paul's agricultural life and hinted at their growing distance. Then it occurred. On April 10, 1970, Paul announced the Beatles breakup. Ringo learned from the press. No one told him. Sat in his lawn, staring at the sky, he went into a profound despair, wondering what to do now that the music had stopped. Once afraid of being replaced, he now faced a silence no drumbeat could break. Paul sued the partners to terminate their partnership on December 31, 1970. Ringo's support for Paul was surprising. The other two raged. They said their Paul issues were handled. The lawsuit made it official. After Ringo joined the war, the brotherhood ended. Ringo released early 1970 as the B-side of It Don't Come Easy in April 1971. He sung about each old friend. George may play if in town. John may jam if he's around. Paul won't even talk to him. That song was his open wound, silently bleeding through the speakers. Money went haywire. Alan Klein pledged to oversee their empire, but froze their royalties for years. By summer 1971, Paul was funding his band's existence. Ringo had no income control. Even solo albums like Sentimental Journey were delayed legally. Bad timing. Ringo's CD was overshadowed by McCartney's. One lovely moment nearly altered everything. George organized the Bangladesh concert on August 1, 1971. John joined until Yoko wasn't invited to perform. He left New York 2 days before the show, storming out. Paul declined to attend. Only Ringo attended. He played with George, smiling through heartbreak. The crowd cheered, but it wasn't a reunion. It was a veiled goodbye. Ringo released his nostalgic Voyage in March 1970. It sold 500,000 copies in 2 weeks and reached UK number 7. Paul's announcement and record release halted it. Nobody went gold. Ringo realized something hard. No matter how much he loved his profession, the Beatles seemed to haunt him. 1973 followed. Ringo released George Harrison Photo. It topped US, Canadian, and Australian charts. In December, it sold over 1 million copies. This was Ringo's biggest solo win. He was in the spotlight alone, and the world cheered. Years passed. He established the All-Star Band in 1989 and performed for the first time in 23 years. Early shows were sketchy. A joke, some said. Ringo persisted. His Classics and Friends tunes were played. Seeing him play drums again brought tears to fans. For nearly 30 years, the band toured. Vertical Man, released in 1998, included George, Paul, Ozzy, and Tom Petty. But Ringo couldn't afford studio rent. The secretary collected and played cello on the title track. Ringo wept when George mailed his guitar solos, whispering, "You're killing me, George. You've made me cry, bugger." The miracle Christian launched Ringo Starr into acting in 1969. Peter Sellers played a tycoon who adopted a destitute man. Though amusing on paper, it became one of his most uncomfortable experiences. The film has extreme sequences, such as people diving into a vat of blood, pee, and excrement to retrieve money. Ringo later confessed he felt embarrassed and uncomfortable with sexual moments, notably the nudity. The tabloids called the film coarse and overdone. The satire was supposed to be about money, but most people remembered the shock impact.